The bonus clears, larger than expected, larger than you have ever earned in a single payment. You check your account 3 times to confirm it is real, and something activates. Not gratitude, not relief, something else, a pressure, a tightness that begins in your chest and spreads outward, a voice that does not congratulate, it warns. You know this feeling, you have felt it before. Every time something good arrives, every time success lands, the feeling that says this will not last, that whispers you do not deserve this, that insists something bad is coming. So you act, not consciously, but precisely. You make a purchase you cannot afford. You pick a fight with someone you care about. You sabotage a project at work. Small distractions, just enough to drain the surplus, just enough to restore the familiar baseline of struggle. And when the money is gone, when the opportunity has passed, when the relationship is damaged, you feel something unexpected, relief. That relief is the signal, not because you wanted to fail, but because waiting for the punishment was worse than delivering it yourself. This is the invisible punishment cycle, the mechanism by which success becomes threat, where achievement triggers automatic self-destruction, where you become both the warden and the prisoner in a system designed to prevent the thing you fear most, not failure, exposure. And no appeal process exists. Today we investigate the invisible punishment cycle, the psychological mechanism where financial gains and personal achievements activate anticipatory self-punishment, creating patterns of self-sabotage that operate before any external consequences materialize. We explore why success feels dangerous, how the nervous system responds to abundance as threat, and what happens when punishment becomes a form of control over an uncertain future. This exploration draws on research into self-sabotage psychology, imposter phenomenon, studies of lottery winners and financial windfalls, and the neuroscience of anticipatory anxiety. What emerges is unsettling, because the threat is not external, it is the part of you that learned long ago that anything good will be taken away. And if it will be taken anyway, better to control when and how the taking happens. The punishment happens before the crime, the destruction arrives before the failure, and most people never realize they are the ones delivering it. You learned this before you had words, before you could decide anything, and most people never learned what taught it. As you consider this, notice something. When you imagine receiving unexpected money, a significant amount, more than you planned for, what happens in your body before any thought about how to use it forms? Does anxiety appear before excitement? Does a sense of waiting for the other shoe to drop arrive instantly? Do you immediately begin calculating what could go wrong? Does success feel unstable, temporary, like something that will be corrected? Notice how fast the feeling arrived, and it activates before you have a chance to think. That is not pessimism, that is pattern recognition, your nervous system identifying abundance as a precursor to loss, and preparing you to survive the loss by initiating it yourself. That response is the system, and research shows that a significant percentage of people who receive financial windfalls return to their previous financial state within a few years. Not because they lack intelligence, but because the internal thermostat is set to a specific temperature, and when conditions exceed that setting, the system activates to restore equilibrium. Anticipatory anxiety is the experience of anxiety about events that have not yet occurred. It is the fear of what might happen, the dread of future pain, the certainty that something bad is coming even when current circumstances are good. For people conditioned by unpredictability, by loss, by environments where good things were followed by bad things, the nervous system learns a pattern. Success is temporary, relief is brief, pain is inevitable, and the waiting is unbearable. If this feels familiar, it is because it worked once. It kept you safe. If you suddenly feel watched right now, That is not imagination, that is memory. Once the pattern is learned, it does not stay in your childhood. This creates a specific kind of hypervigilance, not watching for danger in the environment, watching for danger in your own success, monitoring for the moment when it will all collapse, when you will be exposed as undeserving, when the universe corrects its error. Psychologists identify this as a manifestation of intrapsychic conflicts and unconscious motivations. From a psychodynamic standpoint, self-sabotage reflects deep-seated fears, fear of success itself, because success may be unconsciously equated with loss of identity, loss of relationship, or loss of the familiar narrative of struggle. Think about what this means. Success does not feel like achievement, it feels like exposure, like being visible in a way that makes you vulnerable, like stepping outside the protective camouflage of mediocrity where you were safe because you were unremarkable. And visibility to the nervous system trained by unpredictability is danger. Research into imposter phenomenon reveals that high-achieving individuals often experience intense thoughts of intellectual or professional fraudulence despite verifiable achievements. They believe their success is due to luck or error and live in constant fear of being exposed as unintelligent or less competent. This fear creates a prediction. They will be found out. The success will be revealed as unearned. Punishment will follow. And because the waiting is intolerable, because uncertainty is more painful than pain itself, they deliver the punishment preemptively. Self-sabotage is not failure, it is control, the nervous system attempting to restore predictability by initiating the collapse before it arrives unexpectedly. It does not argue, it reacts. Studies show that individuals may harbor deep-seated feelings of guilt related to surpassing parental achievements, experiencing pleasure, or pursuing personal ambitions. This guilt can drive self-sabotage as a form of self-punishment or as an unconscious attempt to alleviate the burden of success. And the body does not forget. The pattern repeats: achievement, anxiety, sabotage, relief, struggle. The cycle becomes so automatic that consciousness barely registers it. You just know that good things do not last, and you feel compelled to be the one who ends them, because at least then you are in control. This is why people who win the lottery often end up broke within a few years, not because they are irresponsible, but because sudden wealth creates psychological overwhelm. They did not earn it gradually. They did not develop the internal capacity to hold it, and their nervous system, calibrated to scarcity, treats abundance as an error requiring correction. Research indicates that many lottery winners end up in financial difficulties shortly after their windfall. Bankruptcy rates soar for lottery winners 3 to 5 years after winning. The sudden change disrupts established routines and identity, often causing emotional confusion and mistrust. But here is what makes the invisible punishment cycle particularly insidious. It is not about the money itself, it is about what the money represents. Escape from the familiar, separation from the group, evidence that you are different, and different in a nervous system trained to value belonging over achievement is dangerous. So the money must be eliminated, not because you do not want it, but because having it violates the internal law that says people like us do not get to keep good things. And when you do violate that law, the punishment is automatic. Imposter syndrome, more accurately termed imposter phenomenon, is not about lacking confidence. It is about the conviction that you are fraudulent, that your achievements are not real, that you have somehow tricked people into believing you are competent when you know the truth. You are not. And this conviction creates a prediction. Eventually, people will discover the fraud. They will see through the performance. They will realize you do not belong. And when that happens, the consequences will be severe. But here is the mechanism that drives the invisible punishment cycle. If you are certain you will be exposed, and exposure will bring punishment, and you cannot prevent the exposure, the only variable you can control is the timing. So you expose yourself, you create the failure that proves you were right all along. You sabotage before someone else discovers the inadequacy you are convinced exists. This is anticipatory punishment, delivering the consequences before the verdict, because at least then the waiting ends and you are the one in control. Research shows that people experiencing imposter phenomenon cannot internalize their success. They attribute achievements to external factors, luck, timing, other people's mistakes, anything except their own competence, and this external attribution creates vulnerability. Because if success is not yours, it can be taken at any moment, and shame always speaks in permanence. Studies reveal that imposter phenomenon is associated with psychological distress, lower well-being, social anxiety, and depression. But it is more than emotional discomfort. It is a threat assessment, the nervous system calculating that maintaining the facade of competence is unsustainable, that eventually the performance will fail, and when it does, the fall will be catastrophic. So you engineer smaller falls, controlled distractions, ways to prove that you were never that capable to begin with, because being exposed as mediocre after claiming mediocrity is manageable, being exposed as a fraud after accepting accolades is unbearable. From the outside, this looks like self-sabotage. From the inside, it feels like survival. The imposter phenomenon cycle operates in stages. Task presented, anxiety, either over-preparation or procrastination followed by frenzied effort. Task completed, brief relief and sense of accomplishment, then immediate discounting. If you over-prepared, you attribute success to hard work, not ability. If you barely prepared, you attribute it to luck. Either way, the message is the same. This was not you, and next time the luck or effort will not be enough. This creates escalation. Each success requires greater effort or generates greater anxiety, because the internal conviction remains unchanged. You are a fraud, and eventually you will be caught. The only question is when and how bad will it be. And here is what makes this particularly dangerous. The more you succeed, the more convinced you become that exposure is imminent, because each achievement raises the stakes. The fall from a higher position is steeper, the humiliation more public, the consequences more severe. So success, instead of reinforcing competence, reinforces fear, and fear triggers sabotage, and sabotage confirms the original belief. You cannot maintain success. See, you always fail eventually. The evidence you use to prove you are a fraud is the failure you created to avoid being exposed as one. Most people never call this a punishment cycle. They just call it bad luck, poor timing, not being ready. The fraud is not incompetence, it is memory. But the timing is not coincidental. The unreadiness is not accidental. The pattern repeats because the system is designed to repeat. The choice was never succeed or fail. It was wait or control. You sabotage to avoid something worse. What is the fraud conviction is not about competence, but about surviving in an environment where success was punished. There is a particular phenomenon that occurs when people receive sudden large financial gains, whether through lottery winnings, inheritance, bonuses, or settlements. The money arrives, and within a short period, often 3 to 5 years, it disappears. The common explanation is poor financial literacy, lack of planning, excessive spending, and these factors do contribute, but they do not explain the pattern completely. Because the destruction is not random, it is systematic, almost deliberate. This is not about bad people pretending to be careless, it is about nervous systems interpreting abundance as danger. Research shows that 70% of lottery winners return to financial difficulty within a few years of their windfall. But the mechanism is not simply overspending, it is identity disruption, psychological overwhelm. the collision between who you were and who you have become. Sudden wealth creates cognitive dissonance. You do not feel like a wealthy person, but you have wealth, so you continue making decisions aligned with your pre-wealth identity while spending at levels your new wealth permits. This creates a disconnect where you simultaneously feel poor and spend millions. And the nervous system, unable to reconcile the contradiction, resolves it by eliminating one variable, usually the wealth. Ask yourself, who would you be if no one was scoring you? Because winning the lottery, receiving an inheritance, earning a massive bonus, these are not just financial events, they are identity events. Studies reveal that lottery winners often struggle with suicide, depression, and divorce. They become targets for financial exploitation by family, friends, and strangers. They face constant requests for money, investment opportunities, and expectations of generosity that drain resources and create resentment. But underneath these external pressures is an internal one: the belief that you do not deserve this, that it is an error, that keeping it would be theft, that you are obligated to redistribute it because people like you do not get to have financial security while others struggle. This is neurotic loyalty, an unconscious allegiance to the failed or struggling members of your family or community, where success feels like betrayal, where having more than they had feels like abandonment, where financial security means you are no longer one of them. So you sabotage, not because you want to return to poverty, but because poverty is familiar, safe, proof that you have not changed, that you have not left them behind. And the evidence suggests this is not hyperbole. People who receive windfalls frequently describe feeling pressure to maintain their previous lifestyle, to prove they have not become too good for their origins, to demonstrate that money has not corrupted them. But the performance is exhausting, and eventually, eliminating the money is easier than maintaining the pretense. Predictable struggle feels safer than uncertain prosperity. Behavioral economics identifies cognitive biases that contribute to windfall destruction. Mental accounting, treating windfall money as free money and spending it more freely than earned income. Overconfidence, overestimating financial acumen and making risky investments. And lifestyle inflation, immediately adopting expensive habits that are unsustainable. But these are symptoms, not causes. The cause is a nervous system that views abundance as temporary, as unearned, as something that will be taken. And if it will be taken, better to spend it, give it away, lose it on your terms than have it ripped away unexpectedly. The invisible punishment cycle operates here with precision. Success arrives, anxiety builds, waiting for the collapse becomes unbearable, so you initiate the collapse, create debts, make poor investments, support everyone who asks, drain the resource before it can be taken from you. And when it is gone, you feel relief, because now you are back where you belong, where it is safe, where you do not have to maintain the impossible performance of being someone who deserves good things. This is why achievement never resolves the fear, not because prosperity is bad, but because the nervous system was calibrated to scarcity, and recalibration requires more than money. It requires addressing the belief that abundance is dangerous. This is where most people stop listening. There is a paradox at the heart of the invisible punishment cycle. The sabotage feels like losing control, but it is actually an attempt to maintain it. No one ever closes the account, and the interest compounds. Because when you believe that failure is inevitable, that punishment is coming, that loss cannot be prevented, the one thing you can control is when it happens, how it happens, and on whose terms. This is self-handicapping, creating obstacles to your own success so that if you fail, you can attribute the failure to the obstacle rather than to your lack of ability. If you succeed despite the obstacle, it proves how capable you actually are. Either way, the ego is protected from the unbearable conclusion. You tried your best and it was not enough. Research into self-handicapping shows that it serves a protective function. It allows people to maintain a positive self-image even in the face of failure. But it comes at a cost, because the obstacles you create are real, and they produce real consequences. You procrastinate on an important project. If it fails, it is because you ran out of time, not because you lack competence. You create relationship chaos before a major opportunity. If the opportunity falls through, it is because you were distracted, not because you were not good enough. This is not pathology, it is strategy. This is not weakness, it is precision applied too early. The invisible punishment cycle uses this mechanism relentlessly, but instead of protecting self-esteem, it protects the nervous system from unpredictable loss by making loss predictable, controlled, chosen. This is why people sabotage relationships right when they become stable, why they quit jobs right after promotions, why they drain bank accounts right after windfalls. Not because they do not want success, but because success feels like standing on unstable ground, and the fear of falling unexpectedly is worse than jumping. At least when you jump, you know when you will hit bottom. The exhaustion you feel is not moral failure, it is the system overheating. And here is the cruel efficiency of this system. Every time you sabotage, you generate evidence that supports the original belief. See, you cannot maintain success. You always mess things up. This proves you were right to be anxious, right to expect failure, right to protect yourself by initiating it. The cycle reinforces itself, and with each repetition, the pattern becomes more automatic, more unconscious, until you stop noticing you are doing it. It just feels like life, like this is who you are, someone who almost makes it, but never quite sustains it. But there is something deeper. Self-sabotage is not just about avoiding failure, it is about maintaining identity coherence. If you have always been someone who struggles, who does not quite make it, who falls short, then success creates cognitive dissonance. It contradicts the narrative you have built about who you are. And the mind, faced with this contradiction, has two options: revise the identity to match the success, or eliminate the success to match the identity. For most people operating in the invisible punishment cycle, option 2 is automatic. Because revising identity is terrifying. It means admitting that the struggle was not inevitable, that the failure was not destiny, that you could have been different all along. And if you could have been different, then all the years spent in the cycle were a choice, and that is too painful to accept. So the success must be eliminated, not because you are self-destructive, but because keeping it requires becoming someone new, and becoming someone new feels like death. If abundance was not dangerous, who would you be allowed to become? Recognition is not relief, it is responsibility. The problem is not fear of success, it is intolerance of stability. Fear of success is not about fearing achievement, it is about fearing the consequences of achievement, the visibility, the expectations, the scrutiny, the distance from others, the loss of the familiar, the pressure to maintain what you have built. And at the core of this fear is a belief that who you really are is not good enough, that success is a performance, a facade, and if you succeed, people will look closer, and when they look closer, they will see the truth, that you are ordinary, flawed, unexceptional, and undeserving. This is the exposure prophecy, the conviction that success will lead inevitably to exposure, and exposure will lead to rejection, humiliation, and abandonment. So the only way to avoid exposure is to avoid sustained success. Research into imposter phenomenon identifies this as fear of negative evaluation, the terror that others will judge you and find you lacking, that the positive impressions you have created will be revealed as false, that you will be exposed as fraud. And this fear is not irrational, not in the context of environments where mistakes were punished harshly, where failure was met with shame, where vulnerability was exploited, where standing out meant becoming a target. The nervous system learned, visibility is dangerous, do not draw attention, do not rise too high, do not separate from the group. Because once you are invisible, you can be attacked, criticized, rejected, and the pain of that rejection is unbearable. So you stay small, or when you do rise, you sabotage quickly, before anyone can examine too closely, before the exposure happens, before the prophecy is fulfilled. The invisible punishment cycle protects you from the thing you fear most, not failure, prolonged visibility. Studies show that people with high imposter phenomenon experience activation in specific brain regions when viewing disapproving faces. The threat system is constantly scanning for signs of judgment. Every neutral expression could signal disapproval. Every pause in conversation could mean exposure is near. This creates hypervigilance, a state of constant monitoring, watching for the moment when the mask slips, when someone sees through the performance, when the truth is revealed. And under that kind of pressure, sabotage is inevitable, because you cannot maintain perfect performance indefinitely. The nervous system knows this, so it initiates the collapse before the collapse happens organically, while you still have some control over how it unfolds. This is anticipatory self-punishment at its most refined. You punish yourself to avoid being punished by others. You reject yourself to avoid being rejected by them. You expose yourself as flawed before they expose you as fraudulent. At least then you control the narrative. But the prophecy is self-fulfilling. By sabotaging to avoid exposure, you create the very failure you feared would expose you, and the failure becomes evidence that you were right all along. You were not good enough, the success was temporary, and now everyone knows. Except they do not, because most of the time the exposure exists only in your mind. The judgment you fear is the judgment you have already passed on yourself. The rejection you anticipate is the rejection you have already internalized. The punishment is coming from inside the house, and you have been delivering it for years, without realizing that the warden, the judge, the executioner, they are all you, operating on rules written by people who are no longer watching, enforcing standards that were never yours to begin with. This is why self-compassion disrupts the cycle more effectively than self-discipline, because discipline says try harder, control better, do not fail, but the invisible punishment cycle is not about lack of effort. It is about a nervous system convinced that effort will not matter, that failure is inevitable, that punishment is deserved. Self-compassion says, the punishment is not deserved, the failure is not inevitable, and the exposure you fear is not the revelation of truth. It is the activation of an old wound being mistaken for current reality. At some point, if you pay attention, you notice the pattern. You notice that every time something good happens, something bad follows, and you begin to ask, is this really luck or is it me? And that question, uncomfortable as it is the beginning of recognition. Recognizing the invisible punishment cycle does not dissolve it, but it shifts something, because once you see the mechanism, you cannot unsee it. You cannot pretend the sabotage is accidental. You cannot pretend the timing is coincidental. You begin to understand that the punishment is internal, not external, that the voice predicting failure is not prescient, it is programmed, and programming can be examined. Seeing the pattern does not calm the system, it removes its excuses. It just removes the illusion. The bind is real, the fear is real, but the law is not truth. The law exists in your nervous system, not in reality, and nervous systems can learn new patterns, slowly. Some people, when they recognize the pattern, make a decision, not to eliminate all caution, not to become reckless, but to stop treating success as a threat requiring preemptive destruction, to stop punishing themselves for achievements that have not yet failed, to stop initiating loss to avoid waiting for it. This is not about positive thinking, it is about disrupting automaticity, noticing the impulse to sabotage, and instead of obeying it, asking, whose protection is this? What is it protecting me from? Is the threat real, or is it the echo of something that happened before? Often the answer is, the threat was real once, in an environment where success was punished, where visibility was dangerous, where having more than others created problems. And the nervous system adapted. It learned to sabotage preemptively, to stay small, to self-destruct before external forces could do it more painfully. But that environment may not exist anymore. The people who punished success may be gone. The dynamics that made visibility dangerous may have shifted, and the protection that once saved you is now the thing destroying you. Seeing the warden is already an act of resistance, but resistance in this context is not defiance, it is differentiation, separating the past threat from the present reality, recognizing that what your nervous system is responding to is not what is actually happening now, it is what happened then. And the punishment you are delivering is not preventing future pain, it is perpetuating past pain. This does not mean the fear disappears, it means you stop granting it authority, you notice it, you acknowledge it, you understand where it came from, and then you make a different choice. Not because the fear is irrational, but because the response is outdated, designed for a context that no longer exists, and continuing to obey it costs more than risking something new. You were taught that good things do not last, that success invites punishment, that visibility is dangerous, that if something seems too good, it probably is, and you internalized that teaching, made it part of your nervous system, made it automatic, until you began destroying good things before anyone else could. The invisible punishment cycle is real, the anticipatory anxiety is real, the self-sabotage is real, but the law it enforces is not universal, it is historical, conditional, based on circumstances that may no longer apply. What if waiting for the collapse is worse than allowing stability? What if the exposure you fear would not result in the rejection you predict? What if the people you think are judging you are not paying as close attention as your nervous system believes? The invisible punishment cycle does not dissolve easily. It does not respond to logic or reassurance. It responds to repeated evidence that success does not always lead to loss, that good things can last, that you can hold abundance without destroying yourself to avoid the imagined destruction that may never come. But that evidence requires time, and it requires you to stop sabotaging long enough for success to stabilize, long enough for your nervous system to register, this is not temporary, this is not an error, this is real. And real means you have to decide, do you want certainty or possibility? If this landed, if you recognize the pattern of destroying good things before they can be taken, the relief that comes after self-sabotage, the exhaustion of waiting for punishment that never arrives from outside because you deliver it yourself, then subscribe to this channel and like this video for more investigations. Over the next week, notice the moment you want to end something good early. You sabotage to avoid something worse, but the sabotage is the worst thing.